You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We live F1. Welcome to Missed Apex Podcast. I'm your host, Richard Reddy, but my friends call me Spanners, so let's be friends. Today, we're joined by someone who hasn't been cancelled on Twitter for weeks now. It's the most experienced F1 journo in existence. It's Joe Saward. Hello, Joe.
Hello. I'm not the most experienced F1 journalist in existence.
Aren't you? Oh.
No, there's a man who celebrated 900 Grand Prix in Monza.
Really?
I'm not sure that that's actually correct, but that's what he thinks he's done. So, good for him.
This sounds like a pop at someone.
He started in 1969.
Who are we talking about, Joe?
A man called Giorgio Piola. He doesn't do all the races. Well, he does most of them.
He is a tech journo.
He is a tech. He's an artist, actually.
Yeah, he does all the sketches with Airflow and the new designs and works with our very own Summers F1, Matthew Summerfield.
Does he now?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. I learn something every day.
There's a lot going on in F1 at the moment, Joe. F1 is suddenly interesting, and we've got tons of listener questions to fire at you.
It's always interesting.
No, it isn't. At the beginning of the season, F1 was dead on its feet.
No, it wasn't.
Yes, it was.
Fine. No, it wasn't. There's always something to talk about every week. It's just that you 300-word maximum type can't, need some sort of explosive device up your nose to get excited,
Well, do you know what? I grew up in a time where it was a little bit, beads on a string in Formula One, and I've lived through the Schumacher domination, a couple of years of Vettel boring people, and also, obviously Hamilton had a couple of years, and Mercedes and irritated everyone for ages.
He had like 7 years in a row when it was. I mean, if you want dull, you have to say that Mercedes quite often made it quite dull, but it wasn't. At least they were fighting each other to some extent.
Yeah, I know. Whereas the Verstappen 22-23 was terrible, and I think people could stand a couple of seasons.
It's not terrible, it's impressive.
But when it came, oh, come on, Joe, it was so dull. And when it seemed like it was going to be the same again in 24, you have to admit the collective interest just went vroom in the season.
No, I don't know what the collective interest does because I'm not interested in the collective interest, but at the end of the day, I thought it was okay, and we've had 7 winners in 4 teams, which is quite unusual for Formula One. We should have had 8 winners in 4 teams, but one bloke can't drive his car very fast. And would he be somebody you a fan of? Oh, never mind. Moving swiftly on.
Hey, I think. Look,
don't do that. Don't do that, Spanners. I've told you.
I know, that's because it makes my brain heat up and hurt. But I think there's some vindication for Perez coming, that's going to be coming up in this show. But firstly...
Is that before the P45 or after it?
Hot on the... There is no P45. He got re-signed, didn't he? He got maintained.
Yeah. Let me tell you, he got re-signed on the basis that he'd do better. He then got a check at the end of, just before the summer break. And they decided, well, we'll keep him. Even if he is rubbish, we'll keep him. Because the other bloke who's supposed to replace him isn't doing great either. So to say that he's on the bubble is an understatement. He's on one of those bubbles that kids blow, and it goes pop all of a sudden and he disappears into the wild beyond.
Well, since we've started on Red Bull, then we'll go to the Red Bull questions that we've been given by our
Okay, very good. I'm happy with Red Bull questions. Yeah.
Patrons that are in our Patreon Discord who support us on Patreon at patreon.com/missedapex and are joining us live in our Patreon Discord right now. Patrick says, will Red Bull win any more races this season?
Yes.
Really? Because at the moment it looks like they're the 4th best car, floundering.
Well, yeah, but that's one weekend, Max was pretty good in the Dutch Grand Prix, and I'm sure that they won't take it sitting down. So I'm quite sure that Max will win more races this year. I'm not entirely sure that his teammate will win anything.
No, I'm not convinced with that either. Here's my slight argument with Zandvoort is that Mercedes took themselves out of it with performance. Ferrari were pre-update, and now their update looks pretty handy. And so
the update was just for Monza. That was a Monza update. It's nothing special.
You don't think it will carry over?
No.
Can you explain that to people, like why you would have an update that would only work at Monza?
Because you want to try and win at Monza, and you haven't had time or you haven't got money to do another update. these things are sometimes circuit specific, sometimes they're because they've got things they can see the value of putting on the car. Sometimes they're just things that don't work. So they haven't had many Ferrari proper updates. The biggest update of the lot of recent weeks was the Williams update, which is working, and you can see that from the way that what happened at Monza.
But wouldn't
actually it happened at Zandvoort as well, but because the qualifying was such a mess,
yes,
it was hard to spot that the car was suddenly quick, but it is quick.
Oh, that's brilliant. We do have some Williams questions as well later. Wouldn't a car that goes well at Monza also go well at Baku? Lots of long straights and then slow 90-degree corners?
No.
Why?
Well, because it just doesn't. I mean, if you look at the way Baku's got one long straight and then a bunch of wiggly stuff, Monza's got a whole bunch of long straights and fast corners. It's ultimately completely different, apart from the fact there's a bit of fast straights. So I don't think there's anything much. Then we go to Widdly Twiddly Singapore, and then after that, I can't even remember where we go after that. So.
I can look it up later, but that's a bit of a downer.
It's Austin,
Texas.
I just made that up, really.
For the video viewers, you can see my hat that I got in Austin, so I'm very much a Texan. I came back with a hat and 8 pounds of extra body round the middle. Came back 8 pounds more man. Stupid, delicious Texas.
Okay, what can I say?
And I've seen the hill now. I've seen the hill at Circuit of Americas. It's very, very impressive. That was all man-made, wasn't it?
It's steep, isn't it?
Yeah.
People don't see the steepness on television.
No, it's really steep. And a lot of the Americans, we're taking a rest halfway up the hill to that turn one grandstand. There were so many of them like drifting off and taking like let's have a pit stop.
Well, if you want, just to give you an idea, if you ever watch Bathurst on the telly, it looks steep on the telly. Just imagine that in real life.
And it is that. Excellent. Okay.
It's like driving up the Eiger. Yeah.
All right. Well, I was hoping for some more optimism for the Ferrari, because having a new contender coming in when when McLaren seemed to be tripping over themselves would have been fun. But let's get into this from, I think, Quartal is the name we've got in Discord. Real name policy, please, admins. Just as Red Bull seemed to have been pegged back when it looked like a trick they were employing had been explicitly outlawed by recent updates to the rules, is there any indication that McLaren have something going on that might place their car outside of what is legal? And that's, the FIA said all F1 wings are legal, but then they've also said they're launching an internal investigation. So there's not nothing there, is there, Joe?
Well, the FIA is always launching internal investigations, and they rarely find anything interesting. So I don't think there's anything to it, to be honest. If they've found something that the regulations are, it's what Tom Walkinshaw used to call the grey area. If you find something in grey area and the rules don't cover it, so bendy wings are a classic example of that. If they pass the test, they're legal. It's just that the test is wrong. If they bend when they're out on the racetrack, it's that the test is not good enough, not that the cars are cheating. It's, they are designed to meet the regulations. They meet the regulations. It's a bit like 150,000 years ago. Gordon Murray had these sort of hydraulic things that made the car go up and down when it went on track. That was, in theory, legal. The FIA banned it because they didn't want it to be legal. And so you slightly tweak the rules or change the way you measure things. It's not unusual for that to happen. I don't think Red Bull were doing anything with that brake thing. I think that's just a bunch of conspiracy theorists getting too excited.
I think something's happening.
Well, you can think what you like, Spanners. I'm just telling you what I think. And
so you honestly think like nothing, they haven't been nerfed, they haven't had to take anything off at all?
No, I don't think they have.
All right. Okay. It seems like they've lost a lot of performance. I think
they've got some, as they've said from the very beginning, they have got one or two problems with the car that they can't do anything about. And they've admitted as much as that. Now, in some places, obviously, it's working more than in other places. But it's, there's something there. And they don't want to tell us what it is, are they?
No.
But they've got something which is a problem that they can't fix until next year. And it's not unusual for teams to have that as well. So, we'll just see. But I think the biggest problem they have at Red Bull, okay, they had one bad weekend at Monza. I doubt it'll be that bad elsewhere. because fundamentally the thing that gives it away is that Perez was close to Max Verstappen on lap time, and he's never
Yeah,
been that all
that's
year
what
long.
I'm saying.
No. It just means Max was having a bad weekend.
But
And
Zandvoort was a bad weekend.
They don't get the setup right.
Zandvoort, they were miles off of McLaren when they were effortlessly half a minute up the road normally, and then suddenly they were that far back from McLaren at Zandvoort. Like, obviously something's gone off a cliff, Joe. Obviously something has.
No, maybe something else has improved.
Okay, so I think if Red Bull go back to what they started the season with, they're going to be better than they are now.
If other teams have overtaken them, it's far more likely that the other teams have improved, and that's what McLaren was saying. They've had some upgrades and they've done some stuff, and it's good now. Ferrari were all very excited and not on the pace at the start of the year. Were they doing something that got taken off just because the car got slow? Was Mercedes going slowly because it's all just tosh.
All right.
It's wishful thinking, and the reason that Red Bull is in trouble in the Constructors' Championship is they've only got one driver. End of story.
But he took a step closer towards Verstappen since the summer as well, which is quite, I think.
Well, he had to, because otherwise he was going to get fired. And such a big step forward, he still managed to finish 8th and 8th so far, I think it is.
I don't know. Okay, personally, Joe, I'm with you, but personally to me, to do this theory that everyone got better, including his own teammate, all at the same time.
No.
It's a much simpler.
Just a fluke. It's a fluke that his own teammate got better. Yeah. And he won't have got better because when Max gets it all together and the engineers are not messing about or whatever, I'm sure that that will be the same difference as before.
Okay, but
you will then, listen, how many times have you told me I'm wrong and how many times have I got it right? And then you haven't said,
I think I've ended up, I think mostly I end up being right, but then I'm polite about it for future shows because I don't want to say it. Hey, look, I'm sticking it to the establishment, Joe. It's fine.
Okay, well, you stick it to the establishment.
I think it's reasonable for people to think that something's happened. And if you want to say it's like a fluke and it's really unlucky and all these 8 factors have come together, then that's fine. That might well be true, but I don't think it's crazy. But if we go Baku, Singapore and Red Bull recover, then that's fine. That's great. Let's say this form continues Baku, Singapore. At least then we could agree some things must be up.
Well, it depends. Well, what will be important in Singapore is if the form is the same as in Monza, but there is a gap between Max and Perez, then we'll know that will be one element where we'll know that the car's not very good.
Another data point.
They can't fix it, whatever it is. But if they're back together again, and if the car's fast and Perez is right up there, well, I'll be able to say, well, Spanish,
that's true.
You were right.
So that's the ultimate you being right, is if Red Bull are fast again and Perez has also got his act together over the next 2 races.
No, I won't be right by that. Perez, because I don't think Perez is a patch on Max, and I don't think he can get that close unless Max screws up.
Just say these things to hurt me, don't you, Joe?
No, I don't. I'm saying it because that's what I think. Now, I have only watched Perez for like sort of 15 odd years. I don't know how many years he's been in Formula One, but I've seen every one of his races.
Same.
And I watched him before then as well in Formula, whatever it was at that time, Formula 3000, I suppose. And I don't know GP2, wasn't it? Yeah, it's not that old. Formula 3000 is really old, isn't it? GP2. So I think he's a decent driver, but I don't think he's world champion material. Never have done.
No, but race winner. He's won a bunch of races. I just don't think
he won one race, which was a massive fluke in the racing thing because of a big accident and all kinds of other stuff that went wrong. And George Russell driving his first race in Mercedes messed it all up, or the team messed it up for him.
All right.
And then he's won races driving a Red Bull, which is by far the dominant car. And Max Verstappen's had bad weekends, and Perez has won races. So yeah, he's won races, but as I said, he's not a top line driver.
All right. So just 2 things.
I'm sorry to upset the whole of Mexico by that.
Desperately for me to move on to Newey, but Craig Anderson in our WhatsApp, in our Discord, has just posted that basically for the Hungarian Grand Prix, Ferrari and McLaren improved from the previous year by around 0.6, whereas Red Bull were slower by 0.2 a lap overall. So there does seem to be a case that Red Bull have got worse as well as other teams having got better. I think that exists. I think that data exists. And here's the other one, was from Perez's post-race comment saying, I've been struggling for the last 8 to 10 races with this issue. And now suddenly, that was his words, suddenly Verstappen also is struggling with those same issues. So he's just wrong. He's wrong.
A famous phrase from the English courts, Well, he would say that, wouldn't he?
Mm,
Of course he would. He's justifying himself because that's what he always does, because he has to. If he was quicker than Max, he would never have to justify himself.
that's true.
And he wouldn't be on the skids, 1 foot on a banana skin, the other on an ice cube, trying to hang on to the drive.
All right. I do like these. I like these situations because as a armchair pundit, to test yourself when you happen to disagree on a topic with a top journalist, it's a privilege. I really enjoy it, and I appreciate your patience. And I think I'm going to end up being right
I'm
on
very
this
happy
one.
arguing the case.
Yeah.
I just don't think you're right.
I think I am. I think I'm definitely right on this.
Okay, well, you can think what you like. It's a free world out there, apart from when we go to a number of countries I don't talk about.
Okay. All I'll say is that I think that I don't think I'm being mad, or I've just completely lost the plot. I think there's enough data points there that I completely understand why people think something's up. So I'll go with that. But we've got a great question from a bunch of people here about Adrian Newey. So Thrinas says, how reliable are the rumours of Newey going to Aston? Is there any chance he'll still go to Ferrari? How much of an influence could he have at Aston Martin? And can Alonso still win his third title? I'll just include the people who asked about this.
Okay,
Chris
let's go down through that. The last one.
Can I just, Joe? Would you mind if I just read out the listeners? Because I don't want to. I don't want them to feel like they wasted their time messaging. Will Adrian Newey finally be the missing link that can make Lance the F1 World Drivers Champion? I predicted that when they took over Force India. And Pete.
No. Next question.
Pete says Joe has superhuman grapevine powers. Can he develop persuasive powers to still convince Adrian to go to Ferrari? Please, not Aston, anywhere else, please. And Mark said, is Adrian Newey seriously going to end up with a team where one driver is over the hill and another is under the whelm? I just thought that those questions were quite good. What's going on, Joe? In Miami, you said to me, Aston Martin. And that was in May.
Mm-hmm.
Still think so?
I think, well, I'll tell you what. The problem is that Adrian Newey's list of demand it's not just a vast sum of money. It's also the fact he doesn't want to work very hard. He wants to employ a whole bunch of people to do his work for him. And he wants to take all the credit for it. And frankly, it's not a very attractive deal to anybody. He has a value. He has great value in his experience, but he hasn't designed a whole car for a couple of years. He tweaks other people's designs at the moment. And if you're only working 200 days a year, you're not going to be doing anything other than that. Okay, so as a consultant basis, that's fine. Now, if you are McLaren, if you are Ferrari, if you are Williams, if you're anybody, you say, no, we're not going to do that. That's daft. The guy should retire. If that's what he wants, he should retire. If you're Aston Martin and, you live in a kind of cloud cuckoo land that billionaires live in sometimes, you might say, yeah, we'll do that because it makes us look cool and it might work. Well, good for them if they want to do that. I think if he's going anywhere, he's going to Aston Martin still. It's interesting to note that I don't know if I'm supposed to even say that, but there's an announcement.
You are.
Well, I'm not sure. I need to look at
No, I think it's fine.
You would say it's fine. There is some kind of a press announcement of Aston Martin on the 12th of September, which they have flagged as in London, an event in London, which I shan't be going to because it's in the wrong country. But that would, for me, be a potential moment at which they might say something. And I can't imagine why you would flag an event that far in advance, unless it's to sort of, well, it's not going to be negative news, isn't it? Because you kill negative news. So it would have to be positive news. They've already re-signed Fernando. The only other positive news I can think of is that Lance is retiring. But if Lance is retiring, the whole team would just fold up and disappear or be sold. And the Strolls would make loads more money, of course, by selling it all. So I would guess that if there's going to be an Aston Martin announcement, that will be it. Now, whether that makes any damn difference at all in the overall scheme of things is another question. But, the other thing is with Adrian Newey, he's 65 years old. He's tired. He doesn't necessarily want to work all the time. Clearly, he doesn't want to work all the time. And does he want to work with, as you mentioned, an old bloke who may not be as quick as he used to be, but everyone thinks he is, and a guy who is never, ever going to be a world champion unless Daddy buys the fastest car and then fires the fast driver.
Yeah. But that was my prediction when he took over. This was pre-cost cap, though, when they took over Force India.
Yeah, but there's a limit to how much you can buy.
Well, you can buy Adrian Newey, so he can be one of your three that is outside of the cost cap.
Yeah, but you can't buy Pierre Vacher, for example.
Right.
Maybe you don't want him, but the fact is they've tried to buy everybody so far, and they've bought the Red Bull Aero bloke. They bought this guy and that guy and this guy and that guy. They bought all these people, and it still is tugging around in fifth place in the championship with 50, 75 points, whatever they've got. So money doesn't buy you success. Ask Toyota, because they've spent way more money than Lawrence Stroll has spent on Formula One, and they were not successful.
But could it be that they think that getting Newey is the killer move, and they've thrown enough money at him to agree, and that's also enough to convince shareholders and the team and have confidence in the team? If I was a team member, with Derek in the aero bay, and you told me Newey was coming, that would be like a career-defining bit of news.
Why?
Because he's Adrian Newey. He's got there's statues of him, I think, in Milton Keynes.
Yeah, but
on roundabouts.
Winston Churchill was a fantastic leader, and then he got defeated in an election, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean you stay. As the world goes moving on, you've got to stay up to speed with it. And if you don't, you're not, you're still a hero of what you've achieved in the past, but you're not a hero anymore day to day.
So the whole internet of F1 fans listening out for news are thinking that getting Adrian Newey is the biggest coup that could possibly be going. And you're kind of saying, well, temper that enthusiasm. He's a guy that the teams might not necessarily want, which is a surprise to...
Well, it's might not necessarily want. I talk to team principals, okay? That's what I do. And believe me, there's a number of people who'd like to have Adrian, but not on the terms.
That's interesting. Ferrari's the key example of that, isn't it? I think Vasseur...
Well, Ferrari don't want him.
They don't want him.
On those terms. On those terms, they don't want him. And the interesting thing is, if you're willing to propose such terms, you're either not being very realistic, thinking that people will accept them. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But, the only people I see doing a deal with Adrian Newey, unless he changes a lot of the stuff he's asking for, is Aston Martin.
Yeah. I've done that with jobs, freelance jobs, where I go, well, I don't really want it, so I don't care if they turn me down. So I'll just raise my demands or my fee high enough that I won't be disappointed if they then turn around and say, okay. So I think that might be what Newey's done as well, because he's got all the choices inside.
Well, Adrian doesn't know how to negotiate. That's why Eddie Jordan is there helping Adrian, because Eddie Jordan, will sell oil to Saudi Arabia. He will sell coal to Newcastle. He swallowed the Blarney Stone when he was young. Okay. So he's going around doing all the chit chat stuff, and he's very good at it, but Adrian is not a negotiating type.
So how long do we have Alonso at Aston Martin for then?
Well, it depends if they announce anything on September the 12th, I suppose.
He signed a contract last season? A
contract is worth nothing if the people don't want to do it anymore. For all I know, Flavio Briatore might offer Fernando Alonso a 3-year deal to drive for Alpine, because he'll be on a percentage of it for sure. And he might, Fernando might go because it's another 3 years in his career. I mean, I'm not sure they're going to win any races, but who knows? Fernando's just trying to survive in Formula One, until he's 143. But eventually somebody's going to say, well, hang on a minute. The thing is, he's still pretty quick. But then again, we thought that Sebastian Vettel was pretty quick until somebody else got into that car, didn't we?
Leclerc.
No, not that car. I mean, talking about the Aston Martin. Well, and the Ferrari.
Oh, I see.
That.
No. Yeah, definitely Alonso.
Vettel was completely gone off the boil. So, and now, I mean, people the other day, this is why sometimes views on the internet are just a bit silly. Because there's people saying that Audi are going after Vettel. Well, if they are going after Vettel, they truly are Dummkopfs, as they say in Germany.
Well, I apologise to any Germans listening. I don't know how bad a swear that is.
Dummkopf is perfectly normal.
It again.
It just means Dimbo, really.
Right, okay.
Dummkopf, dumb head.
Okay.
Kopf. Kartoffelkopf means potato head, by the way, just in passing.
Kartoffelkopf is my new favorite insult then.
Kopf. Anyway, enough of that rubbish. The fact is that Sebastian Vettel is retired and should be retired and should not even be dreamt of coming back to Formula One because it would be embarrassing because he completely gone off the boil, went off and chasing bees around and whatever he was doing, you know. So that's his thing. But for goodness sake, so there is always a time in a career. It's really interesting, actually. I was talking to David Coulthard just the other day, and he was saying,
"What's that like?"
Well, I talk to David Coulthard almost every
Oh
week.
man, he's such a dude.
You reckon?
Oh,
Yeah, actually, whenever I see David,
he's-
I actually frisk him just to see if he's got his wallet on him, you know.
Right.
Because he's, you know, he's
a bit of a hero of mine. Not only did I like him as a racing driver and thought he was cool, but obviously, like with the now, he's like a media mogul now as well.
He is a media mogul, yeah. And I remember him when he was in Formula Ford. And to be fair to David, he hasn't changed much. And that's what I like most about him, because he's still the same old David Coulthard, and you can always rely on him to say something ridiculously outrageous.
And what did he say to you?
Which I don't report.
And what did he say to you the other day in one of your many conversations with Mr. Coulthard?
What he said? We were talking about various things of you know, the way things are going in Formula One, and he's pretty excited by it all. He thinks we're having a nice time. But I'm, you know, when it comes to where Adrian Newey goes, I think we're all in the same kind of agreement, really.
You all think Aston Martin?
Well, we all think there's only one team that's bonkers enough to take him. Yeah.
Fair enough. But there's like, at the moment, basically
on those terms.
Every news outlet is reporting Newey to Aston Martin all but done.
Yeah, but they're all copying each other, aren't they?
That's what I want. The thing is, when you go down to the sources, they're all quoting from the same source and the same leak. Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
EJ says, I've seen rumours that Lance to WEC after 2025 is all but confirmed. Is that true?
No.
They're going to keep pushing, aren't they? They're going to keep him in F1 until he's 50.
They're going to keep pushing until he says, one day he wakes up and says, Dad, I don't want to do this anymore because I'm not good enough. Now, you know, right now, he can't still believe he's good enough because he's been in Formula One for since he was 12, you know, ever since the first sort of door was opened at Williams, and he's had thousands and thousands and thousands of miles. And at some point, you have to realize that maybe you're not going to cut the mustard in the World Championship levels. I'm not saying he's a bad driver, because he's a good driver and he's a quick driver, but he's not the whole package. And this is what I say about a number of drivers. You know, the whole package. Why people go, why do you think Antonelli's so good? Well, because I do think he's good, you know?
He wasn't very good in FP1, Joe.
Yes, he was. He was exceptionally good in FP1.
For a bit.
And actually, Helmut Marko said to me the other day, he said, that was a big crash. And I go, yes, it was a big crash, Helmut. But he was quick, huh? Yes, Helmut, he was quick. I bet you want him in your team, don't you? Well, it's too late.
Oh, it was Marko saying he was quick.
Toto's got it. Yeah. No. Helmut was impressed by the 1.5 laps or whatever it was he did. And they were incredibly fast. And then he crashed.
It will be so, if he's as good
as... But he's
as...
17, he's 18
now, yeah.
He's 18 years old and 3 days. He's at home in front of his home Grand Prix. He's being announced that weekend, which he already knows he's being announced, so it doesn't make any damn difference, you know. And he was just going about his business. And if you watched him racing in other stuff, Premier have had an awful year in Formula 2. And yet Antonelli is still there, and he's ahead of Berman in the points and all the rest of these things. You know, he's just a proper bloke who's going to be a big star in the future. And anybody who thinks that just because he had a crash, he's therefore going to be written off, that's very internet thinking. You know, my reaction time is 12 seconds, and I've forgotten about what I said 12 seconds later, you know.
Hey, isn't.
What?
Yeah. But if he is as good as everyone is saying, it's an exciting time. And like, I hope that does come to pass, because when these kind of talents come through, it does shake up the world of Formula One. Like Verstappen came in at 15 years old and instantly started just making a horrible, wonderful mess of everything before eventually climbing to the top. And if we're saying we are on the verge of seeing another top talent like that coming through, fingers crossed for Formula One.
We are on the verge of seeing another top talent coming through, just like Max. And I've been around a bit. I've seen a few of them coming and going, and this one's special, in my opinion. Now, they don't always. There are some who look special and don't really deliver, but not often. The really special ones, you kind of see them coming, and they just keep coming.
Is it a bit disencouraging for the rest of the Formula 2, Formula 3 field to see two drivers in what has been a kind of a mid-performing car go to F1? So the two Prema drivers go to F1, even though, they're not the champions, they're not up there at the top of the table. Does it make it feel like, well, what's the point in F2? Because it's been decided already.
Mm-hmm.
Is there that feeling?
Well, I think you asked an interesting question there. What's the point in F2? Yeah.
Oh, so you're agreeing?
But the fact is that F2 and F3 don't always throw up the fastest people. It depends on a number of things. There's a lot of difference in engine power sometimes. There is some teams have the chassis better than others. If you look at Formula 3, Trident's great. If you look at Formula 2, Trident isn't great. So these are things that you need to look at and judge. You can't really sort of say, well, a guy in a bad car is going to be winning the championship. And then you can see guys who are sort of moderately okay, the Porsches, the Schumachers, these kind of people who come through and win the championship, and it's not fair because they didn't make it in F1. It's, that F1 is where you basically stop messing about and you got to deliver.
Yeah, I think
the rest of it's a masquerade ball, if you like.
The fear is sort of going, well, they've picked these talents out even from like karting and Formula Ford, and they know the right people or they've got the right connection, and then the rest of it is okay. We'll pay your dues in F3, F2. We, as long as you don't make an awful mess of that, we already had our eye on you. It's got to be galling.
No, but they're almost all like that. You go through the grid in F2. How many of them are supported by a young driver scheme from McLaren, from Alpine, from Mercedes, from Ferrari? Go through, count the numbers. Bortoletto is an interesting one. I mean, he was born lucky last weekend because he started back at the grid and won the race, but thanks mainly to a safety car that came out at exactly the moment he needed it. But he's a young McLaren driver, and he's being talked about in relation to Audi. He does have a large amount of financial assistance from a bank in Brazil to help him, which make you more attractive, even in a team like that. So we'll see. I mean, he's a good driver, clearly, but you don't, there are some who just stand out. There's a whole bunch of guys. And listen, anybody who takes winning in the second year has a question mark. Formula One's like that. If you can only win in your second year, you ain't good enough. Because if you look at all the ones who come through from F2, this is the view.
Well,
I'm not saying I necessarily agree with it, because some people are slower developing than others. But the fact is, if you look at it, you have the Leclercs, the Russells, the Bottases. They win first year, or not at all. And then the ones who stick around and win I can't even remember. There was a whole string of champions.
Palmer won in his fourth season, for example. I think Stroll.
Stroll didn't win.
He didn't win. I thought he was an F3 champion, Stroll.
Oh, F3,
yeah. Okay, yeah.
No, I mean, if you go back, you have people like, I can't even remember them all, but there's a whole bunch of Formula 2 guys who stuck around and learned how to do it, and then nobody wanted them, and they're all surprised. Pantano and these kind of people, who generally end up in sports car racing or disappear completely. It's not about working to get there. It's about being brilliant enough to get there. And Formula One really only wants the exceptionals. It doesn't want the goods. It wants the exceptionals because everybody's good.
So if anybody's got time on their hands out there listening and wants to do a chart of how well drivers did who won their first F2 championship and drivers who came to F1 having not won in their first championship. That might be a good comparison.
Well, in the modern era, I think you can say that.
Oh,
I don't think if you go back to the old days, it's different. I mean, the old Formula 2. But GP2, I think from GP2 onwards, really.
Interesting. I have another Mercedes question before we go to our bank of McLaren questions. Is George Russell in a bit of trouble with Wolff saying that he's still flirting with Verstappen for 26?
No, I think that Toto would like to get Max on board with Mercedes because he believes Max is the best talent out there. The only trouble is, in order to get Max on board, you have to convince him that the Mercedes will be a winning car in 26. Nobody knows what the engines are going to be like in 26. So, and he has a contract, not that contracts matter much, but he has a contract with Red Bull up until the end of 26. All the main players have contracts up to 26 because that's the time to change teams. When everyone knows what the engines are, then you change teams and go and get a good engine. So now, up to now, you can say, everyone can say, we've got a great engine. Renault are saying it. You know, it's all the fault of the Enstone chassis. The French were saying that the other day. The Audi people are saying, well, the engine will be fantastic. And everybody's going, yeah, right. Mercedes might be good. Ferrari might be good. Ford, Red Bull might be good. How do we know? Honda might be good.
Yeah, they've all got to gamble, Joe, but...
Yeah, I know. That's the whole point. But if you're going to gamble, you stay where you are and you don't gamble so much.
Okay. Well, Wolff has been praising Antonelli. From the second Hamilton said he was leaving, I knew I wanted to give that to the contract to Antonelli. I'd love to get Verstappen in the team. I'm still flirting with him. I've been pushing for all this time. He hasn't said, and also Russell's our future, by the way.
How long is Antonelli's contract with Mercedes?
I'm going to guess by your tone, it's 1 year.
Well, it's 1 year with options, for sure.
Right.
So if Antonelli is deeply disappointing or plants in the wall all the time, maybe he'll get booted out and George will stay, you know. But that's all based on the fact that Max Verstappen might be available. He might also not be available. So, you know, all they're doing is keeping the options open and trying to convince Max it's a good idea. But if you're Red Bull, you just say to Max, look, we got the winning car. But up until 2 weeks ago, we got the winning car. We've won all these championships. Don't make it, you know.
Something I forgot about earlier, Joe, when you were saying they're going to bounce back. You said they're definitely going to bounce back. Mark my words, or my name isn't Joe Archibald Sayward. When you said that earlier in the show, Verstappen said
not quite what I said, but never mind.
Well, my memory might be.
Yeah, your memory is definitely faulty. Right,
but Verstappen said we're not winning any more races.
Verstappen said we're not winning any more races.
Verstappen said we're not going to win any more races this season.
Okay, well, I didn't hear that. So
does that move the needle?
I'm surprised if he said that.
Okay, Discord. Do us a favor, try and find that quote for me.
Maybe he's just like some people do sometimes, trading in hyperbole.
Just being downbeat, possibly. All right, let's move on to McLaren. We've got some great questions here. I will take these one at a time then, and we'll see what we can do. So, Milos asks, how likely do you think, Joe, it is that Oscar does have a contract like a equal status or number one status clause in his contract?
They are clearly not favouring one nor the other. And it would be wrong if they did.
What? At this stage in the season, Joe?
No. It devalues the world championship to win it with team orders.
Oh well, then there's a lot of devalued championships then.
Yes, there are.
21 devalued.
21.
2021. Verstappen. Verstappen, there was the two AlphaTauris and Perez all had team orders to let him go by, breeze by, and help him out. Perez blocked Hamilton in Abu Dhabi quite deliberately. So that's devalued his championship.
That's not the same as team orders. Team orders being you will move over and let your teammate through is not the same as you will run defense a little bit. It's not the same.
Perez ran defense. and
No,
and
but
he let him
that's
through.
not the same thing. It's not the same thing.
I'm failing to see why.
If you're doing the Rubens Barrichello, you got to hand over now. You are going to hand over to Michael Schumacher, so Michael Schumacher can win his nth championship. That's team orders I'm talking about.
Wasn't it a standing order with Perez? You will not challenge Verstappen. Full stop.
No, I don't think there's any such thing. You just can't. No, you're confusing two questions here. One is team orders as winning, and the other one is team orders to run defense for a guy who's quick. That's not the same thing at all. I don't have a problem with running defense for a guy who's quick. I do have a problem with saying to Rubens Barrichello at the end of the race, you will move over and let Michael overtake you.
Oh, that was horrible. 2002.
Yeah, whenever it was. But, I hate that. That's, and I respect Williams for losing the world championship back in the 80s by letting Mansell and Piquet fight one another, and Prost came through and nicked the championship.
That's really interesting.
And if McLaren are going to call the thing, I mean, maybe towards the end of the year when it's clear that Oscar can't catch.
It's clear now.
It's not clear now. What happens if Oscar wins the next 5 races?
Well, he'd need team orders and for Lando Norris to not take any points off him and not interfere and not overtake
maybe he'll
him.
Just learn more.
If they suddenly turned around and said, "Well, we're backing Piastri," that would mean that would be relying on Norris. Then
I didn't say backing Piastri, but there's also at the end of a season there comes a point at which, a lot of teams will say to the driver, "Well, look, you can't do it anymore," which is different. Again, it's different. It's a subtle difference between you can't do it anymore. In other words, statistically, you can't make it anymore. And saying you will give up points for our man. I don't like you will give up points for our man. I don't mind you can't win, therefore you can help him. That's all right.
I hope everyone listening, and Joe as well, values Joe's opinion more in the face of my disagreement, because I'm not trying to be difficult for the sake of it. I just happen to disagree here. I think those drivers are equally matched enough that neither one of them or either one of them will take points off the other in a championship run, which gives you such a distinct disadvantage against a team like Red Bull that will absolutely have a standing order.
Well, I don't believe they have a standing order. It's just that one's better than the other. Simple. No, but everybody likes to have a conspiracy theory. There are some teams in the past, like Ferrari, that had a very clear number one policy with Michael Schumacher. It was as simple as that. It was in his contract and done. There are very few teams that have contracts like that because they're not, you never know what's going to happen in Formula One. And sometimes for example, your number one driver can miss a few races. And, and there was that one where Mika Salo could have won a race against Eddie Irvine. And because Michael Schumacher had his leg in a cast, Ferrari insisted that Mika give it up. Now, Mika went on to have years and years and years of sports car drives with Ferrari and made loads of money as a result of it, I'm sure. But, he gave up winning a Grand Prix, which he could have won. And I just don't think that's right or fair or honest.
Some of it's philosophical. For you to then add the honest in at the end while I was forming my thought is interesting, because I am not against team orders. I've never been against team orders. So that's consistent. I was happy with Perez running interference with against Hamilton with Verstappen. I think it's a little bit definitely crossing the line, the fact that the Toro Rosso AlphaTauri drivers would yield to Verstappen and then fight Hamilton to the death. I thought that's probably a little bit over the line. But in general, I would always, as a team boss, have a number one and a number two. And you could have like an older driver.
They decide that is decided. In a sensible team, the number one and the number two is decided by performance. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, and the championship table is
if the championship goes away because you're being fair with two drivers, that is the route that a sporting team will go.
Oof.
That's what Williams did. They didn't do it by accident. Back in that famous occasion, they literally gave the championship away because they would not back one or the other. Let them sort it out themselves.
Not from the beginning of the season, but with a third of the way to go, one driver 60 points from the title and one driver more than 100 points back. Surely it makes sense now. So you're saying under no circumstances should Piastri support Norris at any point?
No, if Oscar can beat Lando on the racetrack, that's Lando's problem.
Oof, it is a big problem then. He's got a huge problem then to win this
Yeah,
championship.
yes, he probably does. But then again, if he's quicker than Oscar, he doesn't have a problem.
Okay, let's say like they're fairly even, but Piastri's got nothing to lose, so he can just keep sending it down the inside, and Norris doesn't want to wipe out his two teammates. Because that's the situation at Monza. He was very gentlemanly, broke early to make sure he could really tuck in, and Piastri had no such consideration. Anybody else out of the other 18 cars, and Norris is sending him into the dark realm, isn't he? Off into that chicane. So I don't know. It just feels, why is he having to fight his teammate so much? Like, don't McLaren want the
But
glory
if his teammate
of the
wasn't
championship?
fast, he wouldn't have to fight him, would he?
Well, I don't know. Don't McLaren want to be celebrating at the end of the season? That would be my last question on it.
Of course they do.
Wow.
But you know something? The way things are going right now, they are going to be celebrating. They won't be celebrating the drivers because they haven't done a good enough job to win the drivers. And Lando's made tons of mistakes, which, being Lando, he's admitted to every single one of them. You know, which is very nice and honest and fantastic and good gamesmanship, rah, rah, rah. But, you know, the fact is that he's made too many mistakes. His starts are lousy. He gets beaten quite a lot. So, you know, to say that Oscar should give it all up because Lando's got more chance than him isn't right either. So yeah, just let him get on with it. My view has always been, let him get on with it. And if one of them can't win, then you can help a little bit.
Okay. I think it's madness to basically choose not to win the World Drivers' Championship for fairness. If it was the other way around...
The World Drivers' Championship doesn't pay the beans.
I think there's some value. There's some value to having the champion in your team.
It's a PR value, yeah, but the team gets the money from the constructors, so...
By the way, I'm getting a lot of you Norris fans, Brit bias stuff. I am not a Norris fan. I would much rather be sitting here saying that Piastri should be supported by Norris. Believe me, and I'll be pushing for that next year.
I am fans of both of them, and that's where it should be. You see, everybody thinks that you're supposed to be a fan of one or the other. You can just be fan of the whole lot of them.
Pick a side.
You can be less of I pick sides.
Coward. Pick a side.
No. I pick sides all the time with people who aren't good enough. I just say it out loud.
Yeah, I mean, they're both
people
great.
Don't like that. These two guys are both exceptional. Lando's got more experience than Oscar. So, you know, Lando should be the team number one. And Oscar's learning all the time and getting better all the time. He's making mistakes because young drivers make mistakes, you know. But he's not making enough mistakes to get himself into trouble and get thrown out. A la Logan, you know.
So when other drivers, the top drivers, were in these championship positions, you know, the Verstappens and the Hamiltons, it doesn't feel like... Well, in fact, you could probably compare this to Hamilton 2007, where you can almost like count up the missed opportunities, and that could have been the same in 2008. So maybe people are being a bit harsh on Norris.
No, I think the problem is that so many fans out there have nationalistic bias.
No.
Yes.
A little bit.
A lot of people have that, and that's fine. They can have that. They can beat the drum and go, rah, 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 our man's the best. But at the end of the day, when somebody says, well, actually, he isn't the best, you know, they have to accept that. But they don't. They turn around, they insult you, they threaten to kill you. You know, all these sort of things that happens on social media.
You got to double down.
It's just tosh. The fact is that, you know, if you happen to be Dutch right now, you're lucky because you got the best driver in the world right now. Now, if you're British and you think Hamilton's as good as Max is, well, right now, on paper, he ain't. You know, so you just have to take it as it is, and it's also related to the fact that it depends on your machinery. Da 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 da. You know, all the same old arguments, but nationalism is just a completely stupid way of looking at things.
No, it's
yes,
not.
It is. No, you've got to be objective and rational.
Joe, I will argue with this.
Of course you'll argue with it, but you know...
In sport, geographical convenience and bias is the basis of all fandom. So you support your local team, and that's applauded. You support your national team in soccer, that's applauded. But if you do it in F1, it's stupid. Why is that?
Because F1 is an international sport, and World Cup soccer is about national teams competing against one another. It's not the same thing at all.
It's not A1 GP, is it, Joe? and it never
No,
will,
it's
and it
not, and
never will be.
that's why A1 GP never got off the ground either.
Ask your uncle about A1 GP. There was a Ferrari question. I apologise because Ferrari's the last of these top teams that we didn't cover, and I apologise that I have lost the person to ask it. But it's basically with that win, are they back in the hunt basically? Because I did some championship maths. If you want to hear it, Joe, do you want to hear it?
You can do all the maths you like. Go on.
So basically, if Charles Leclerc, if everything finishes how it finished in that last Grand Prix, then Charles Leclerc will get 441 points. Norris will have 379 points. Verstappen will be third with 376 and Piastri fourth on 362. So if everything finishes every sprint, every race like it did at Monza, Leclerc walks the championship. So are they still in it?
Yeah, but it won't.
You don't know.
No, it won't. It will not. Every result will not be Charles Leclerc winning and Max Verstappen finishing sixth. I'm sorry. Sorry to pop your balloon, but it won't happen like that because Lewis Hamilton will win some races. I'm sure George Russell will probably win some races. About the only one of the top 8 who won't win a race, well, I'll leave that to you to guess. But there you are.
Scrouse challenges you a little and says, how can you say the World Cup and F1 are so different when we just watched Monza? So saying about nationalistic lines.
No, I'm not saying that the Italians aren't nationalistic. I'm saying as an observer.
You just called all the Tifosi stupid.
No, I didn't. It's because, no, if you're a journalist, this is the difference. I am looking at it from a different point of view to all the fans. I just don't understand. Fans are completely blind to the flaws of their heroes. Now, why would you be blind to the flaws of your heroes? That's what annoys me. You know, just be a fan of Formula One and look at it objectively and say, that guy's good. I don't care if he comes from Papua New Guinea. If the guy's good, I don't care. I don't care if he's a headhunter. A female headhunter from Papua New Guinea wins the world championship. You know what? I'll be going, yay, the best driver won.
Hello to all our headhunter audience there. Sorry for Joe picking you out as a negative connotation.
No, that's not negative at all. Yeah. I would say the same thing about lots of other people.
The Tifosi are harsher on Ferrari than they are of other teams. So I think that's why they're a good fan base. I think that's the same as a lot of football teams are like that as well. But it's understated that McLaren are kind of like that in the UK. So I would say McLaren are the most supported team in the United Kingdom.
Hang on. McLaren, yeah, is owned by
Bob McLaren.
No, it's owned by Bahrain.
Right. Okay.
Why? It's a British team based
it's a British team.
in England. Yeah.
Yeah, but all the football teams are
owned. Red Bull is owned by Austrians and people from Thailand.
Yeah, but all the football
Williams is the only English team there is.
I'm saying to you, if you do a survey in Silverstone and say what's your favourite team, McLaren wins by a mile.
Maybe.
I think.
Yeah, but perhaps probably because they've just been winning or been better of late. The older fans will probably still say Williams.
Fair enough. Okay, we've got a couple more listener questions that won't get... I'm just trying to get you cancelled, Joe. It's been ages since you've had a Twitter storm against you. It's getting boring now, to be honest.
Yeah, I know, but I don't really do Twitter anymore.
Oh, come on. So I'm going to post...
That dreadful man keeps putting adverts all the time. So.
I'm going to just post our TikToks. I'll post them on Twitter instead, just to get you back in the loop, Joe. Just to get you...
I don't wish to be in a Twitter storm.
Get back in the war, Joe. Okay.
I'm in the war all the time.
I'm
fighting the war in the paddock every weekend. So.
Tom from Canada says, what's the likelihood of Alpine being sold and further on that being sold to Andretti? Nico Rosberg on Sky just blowing that wide open and saying, I got an email offering to buy or be part of a group to buy Alpine. Renault saying not for sale. I think it's quite obvious it is for sale.
Yeah, me too. I just think it's 100% for sale. Now, they might say no because they're trying to build up the value for a couple of years. And if you've got people competing, capitalist people who are competing and don't know all the facts, then the price goes up. So, and, you know, I'm not sure that Andretti will be able to afford what Alpine will cost to buy it. Because Alpine, you know, the Andretti business plan had a limit to it, as I understand it. And What is that?
Don't mind my ragdoll Noopsy. He's just joining me. Sorry, he's not
Okay.
vocal like Squeaks, but he is here having a nap in my sim rig, so he's come to say hello. But yeah, they might not be as vocal about it.
I can't remember what we were
I've
talking about
ruined
now,
it with
was
my fluffy ragdoll, haven't I? Look, let's
You
have a
have,
look at a
yes.
fluffy cat belly instead, and
it?
that'll be.
I'm so taken aback by I don't like cats very much.
Oh, boo! That's why he's run away. We'll go with Tim Rudd's question then. Does Colapinto have a realistic route to being on the grid permanently? It's a good question, Joe, because I know nothing about this guy until we heard his name being announced as a replacement. Everyone was saying Schumacher, Antonelli.
If you read your
Lawson.
JSBM
Joe, I don't
newsletter,
read.
if you read your JSBM newsletter, you will have seen that I suggested that Colapinto would be the replacement a couple of weeks before it happened.
But Joe,
Because-
how can the ordinary person even get access to the Joe Saywood newsletter?
Just by giving me tons of money, that's all.
Should we link to it in the show notes, Joe? It
Yes,
is
well,
good.
quite
It is
right
good.
too. I mean,
missed that
lots
one.
of people do buy it, and lots of people know these things. So, if you're a super fan, go on, put your money where your mouth is. That's my view. I've got to pay all these ridiculous expenses to go around the world. So, I need to have funding.
Please tell me about Colapinto.
Colapinto is a decent driver. Now, he comes from Argentina, where there is basically not a whole lot of money because the economy is a disaster. And it has been a disaster for so many years, it's just not funny. And but he's worked his way up and he's got through and he's impressed enough people to Williams picked him up and said, we'll put him on the young driver scheme. He works very well. He's done some good tests. He works very well in the simulator. And so they said, it can't be any worse than Logan Sargent. And he's not going to tank it into the wall and smash up all our new parts and then blame the team for not being fair to him and this kind of stuff. Everybody knows that Logan Sargent was quick. He was quick, but he just couldn't hold it all together.
Yeah, Piastri's always going on about how quick he is.
Yeah. Colapinto arrives, does a decent job, finishes 12th. Okay? He messed up in qualifying, but until he messed up, he was about a 10th behind Albon, and a 10th in your first race behind Albon is a mighty, mighty impressive achievement. Okay, he ran wide at the Lesmos, and therefore he ended up back in 17th. But he could have very easily have done something much closer to Albon, and that everyone would have gone wow. And that's what we'll wait and see. If he does a few wows later in the year, now there's no drive for him next year at Williams. But do you remember Jenson Button, your new best friend? Do you remember that in 1999, I'm trying to remember which year it was, but he signed for Williams BMW knowing that he didn't have any possibility of the year afterwards. But it worked because he did a good job. Somebody else picked him up, and then they paid Williams to get his contract. And that's why he went to Benetton.
Excellent.
And then he had a career in Formula One for many years after that. So, if he does a good enough job, someone will go, oh, that Colapinto is really good. We'll have him. And Williams will go, well, you can have him, but it's going to cost you a bit. And then they'll negotiate a bit. And,
But
and Williams will say, well, we've got another one.
Yeah.
We've got a young driver program, got another one coming, and another one. The next one is quite good too, so.
Who's the next one?
The next one is currently in Formula 3. And if you ask me to remember all the names, I can't remember everybody's name.
I'm
but
with
he's
you.
good.
I feel you.
Anyway,
I
he
feel
finished
you.
third in the championship.
But is he special?
He's very fast. Makes lots of mistakes, but he's very fast.
But
is he special? In the way that Antonelli was special? No.
No, on the
not
James
necessarily.
Vowles scale of special.
He's quick. He
Mm.
is quick.
Okay.
But he does make a lot of mistakes. And he did it again in the championship showdown at Monza. He spun off. He was doing a good job. He qualified badly, was charging up through the fields as best he could, spun off. The champion in Formula 3 this year didn't win a race.
Yeah.
Didn't win a race. And the guy who finished second won one race. This guy won 3. Okay, so what does that tell you about the championship? It tells you that the points are all messed up if you've got people winning the championship who haven't won a race.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because winning should be rewarded properly. And that's the other thing. You've also got endless numbers of winners because you have reverse grid rubbish and all that sort of stuff. But let's not go into that because I hate it.
And I don't know if Joe's random comment about Jenson Button being my new best friend, my new close personal friend. I don't know if I mentioned that we have got a Jenson interview coming up. I don't know if I mentioned it at the weekend, but it was going to come out today. But it's actually been bumped for you, Joe. We bumped Jenson Button for you. Plus, we also get to have that in the run-up to the Baku Grand Prix when everybody's interested. But yes, we go in and spoke to him as a part of his build-up to the Jota WEC weekend at the Circuit of the Americas, and we spoke to Jenson Button and Callum Eilert, so we'll get that interview out to you guys in the build-up to the Baku Grand Prix. We've got one last question, Joe, if you've got time. Do you have time for a quickie?
Yeah, just about.
Okay, so Paddy says, is there anything about Joe being discussed at the moment in terms of his future and sponsors and backers, or has it all gone away? And I think that kind of links into Wallace's question with what's going on with Sauber and Audi. Are we going to have Bottas in there, or are we going to have a Daniel Ricciardo for what year? What's going on?
Well, I don't think they know, so how am I supposed to know?
Guess.
I think that they will go for, well, no, I don't. I don't know for sure because the people making decisions may not know much about Formula One. And, who's making the decisions? Is it Mattia Binotto? Is it Gernot, whatever his name is, the CEO of Audi who doesn't like Formula One?
I
Is
don't
in charge
know.
of the program? Dorna is his name. Because they just fired half the people in the management who did understand about Formula One or half understood. And now they've got the whole thing is really weird, really strange. So they could decide whatever they want. It could be Bortoletto, for example, because Fernando Alonso manages him and, thinks he's good. And he is quite good. Could it be Joe? I doubt it. He hasn't really done anything of late. Bottas, it could be because Bottas understands what teams need to be competitive at World Championship level because he has been there. He's won races. He has a lot of values, but then again, he doesn't qualify particularly well. And there's lots of things you can argue everybody's case differently. So
I've got this feeling that Hulkenberg's got something in the right circumstances. He could really show people something.
Yes, he does. The Hulk is a vastly underrated driver, vastly underrated, always has been. And, you can see the progress that Haas have made this year is in part obviously due to their design team and their development teams, but it's also due to the fact they've got a driver who gives them feedback that makes the car go faster. And that's important. And there are not many people around who can do that, in the same level. The Hulk is really good. And I think he's a very good choice for Audi. He's a very good choice for him because he's getting towards the end of his career and they're going to pay him loads of money. And he's German and it all fits in nicely. But will it actually amount to any great success on the racetrack? That's another question.
He's 37, so at the end of, what is it, a 2-year contract?
He's got six years to go to catch up with Alonso then.
Fair enough. Yeah, people can continue. And continue is what you do with your GP Plus magazine. So you have a PDF race report with all pictures from the Grand Prix and everything. It's very popular. How can people subscribe to that, Joe?
Well, you go to grandprixplus.com. And it will amazingly pop up on screen. You just sign along the dotted line and give some money and you'll get your thing.
It's like a podcast, but for people who read.
Well, there are people in the world who read. There is a thing called literature. You see over that shoulder there?
No.
Those are called books.
Oh, right. I see.
And
okay.
and you read them to gain knowledge. It's not just all on Wikipedia.
I used to read a lot. I used to be obsessed with reading, but since streaming TV came along, I don't see the point. And podcasts and YouTube.
Exactly. You can spend your life watching Emily in Paris instead, eh?
But for those of you who do read, I can highly recommend Grand Prix Plus magazine, the high value quality Joe Saywood newsletter. We'll put links to all of those. And of course, the Green Notebook, which is kind of like your travelogue.
Well, the Green Notebook's free, which is why people love it.
But it's good. But that you really need to read because it's like, I was walking through the fields of Monza and then a butterfly landed on
Frutigen this week.
a butterfly landed on my wrist, and it made me contemplate the transfer market. It's that kind of thing. And then I had a sandwich and some pasta. It's good. I'm recommending it. Don't get angry. I'm recommending it, Joe. Joe, thank you very much.
I'm not getting angry. That was a sigh of resignation.
Go and follow Joe at Joe Sayward as well. Like, he will come back on Twitter and end up causing a storm, so it's always worth that, just for the amusement value alone. You can't stay away, and you won't stay away from the shed, will you, Joe Sayward?
No, I don't know, actually.
He'll be back. And until we see you next, work hard, be kind, and have fun. This was Missed Apex Podcast with Joe Sayward and me. This podcast was like a butterfly getting squished by time.
Whatever.